BSAA sent in this team to apprehend Irving. They also sent Chris Redfield to do the same thing on his own separately from the team. You might think it sounds stupid to separate Chris from the assault team, who are already in the process of arresting Irving, but this was probably done to save the lives of those men. Chris does not have the best track record when it comes to keeping his team members alive.
The paramilitary groups featured in these games are for the most part always getting wiped out to show that even a soldier trained to fight POWs isn't ready for what awaits them. More importantly though, it's not like Chris is in charge or responsible for keeping anyone alive. He was not put in charge of a team until Resident Evil 6.
Does every Resident Evil game have to reinvent what turns people into monsters? Every virus and parasite does the exact same thing. Zombify or mind control people and turn people with more character into massive mutants. Does the name matter that much when there's barely any discernible difference?
I'm sorry, what? Barely any discernible difference? I don't think those that played any Resident Evil game from the PS1 era and Resident Evil 4 would agree.
It didn't take long after the fall of the Umbrella Corporation for their bioweapons to end up in the hands of terrorists.
Narration.
Well, we do need something other than reading to fill in certain background details.
Governments of the world turned to the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium, which formed the Anti-Terrorism Unit, BSAA.
Game expects me to believe that the developed nations of the world would turn to a pharmaceutical conglomerate to deal with bioterrorism rather than combat it themselves. It was a pharmaceutical company that started this whole mess to begin with. And wouldn't a pharmaceutical company's assets be better to use developing cures for bioweapons instead of fielding private armies?
The thing that you have to understand is that the pharmaceutical company in question has had their assets stolen or retrieved by individuals who, instead of turning it into the authorities or use it to develop cures and vaccines, instead sell them to the rival companies, terrorists, or sell them on the black market, just to name a few. I mean, remember this guy?
Hello, I'm in this game because the developers were worried people would think our game was racist because it's a story about killing Africans.
I know some people flipped their shit when that first trailer dropped, but several people have addressed in interviews that Sheva was always intended to be in the game. Considering she went through several different designs and backgrounds, it could simply be possible that not everything was ready to be revealed with that first trailer. You don't have to take my word for it though. Karen Dyer, who voiced and did the mocap for Sheva, said so herself, as did the game's producer, Jun Takeuchi.
It's telling that Sheva has not appeared in any other Resident Evil game since this one. Resident Evil is a series that loves to get mileage out of its characters after all.
And she isn't the only one. Carlos from 3, Billy from 0. Hell, even before this video was made, Rebecca had not really been heard from in more than 10 years. Sheva has been mentioned, however, in both Resident Evil 6 and Resident Evil Revelations 2.
Chris is bulked up so much that if you put a knob on him, I think you could use him as a door.
Okay, that was a little funny, but it was explained by one of the developers that Chris bulked up considerably in preparation for his eventual confrontation of Wesker. You have to admit that this stronger, more muscular Chris is better equipped to deal with some of these BOWs in general.
Chris and Sheva failed to notice the bloodstains covering this soldier's uniform.
Bloodstains on the shirt of a soldier who's also armed with a machine gun who is right outside of a quarantine zone? Besides, based on Sheva's backstory, she should be used to seeing stuff like that.
Are you okay?
Chris, a man who has lived through multiple zombie outbreaks and works for a private military dedicated to stopping bioterrorism, asks a guy who is just infected if he needs help just before he loses control and attacks them.
I mean, I can't blame Chris for not instantly knowing that this local was infected and that he would attack him. This is the first time that he's actually encountering someone infected with Las Plagas.
What the hell just happened?
They don't move like any zombies I've ever seen.
Immediately.
This whole town's gone to hell. The people here, they're acting like those Ganado detailed in the Kennedy report. And aside from that, there's something new, something we've never encountered before.
There's so little going on in the first half of this game that I'm actually at a loss to find things to sin. I know it's bad, but I'm drawing a blank through all of this. The first 3 hours of this game is nothing but Chris and Sheva walking around and fighting villagers.
So little going on in the first half of this game? Dude, did you play this game all the way through? Sure, it throws away the formula of survival horror this series is known for and trades it in with survival action that started with Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, but the action is very entertaining and gives the player something to do and keep up with.
Wait a minute. That's the...
Yeah, let's not save that guy's life. He only works for us.
Actually, the Butcher works for the BSAA just like Chris and Sheva, and likely Chris realized that they could not do anything to save him without dying alongside him. It's not reflected well in the gameplay that follows, but there's a huge number of Magini in this area, along with the Executioner, and all that you're armed with this early if you start a new game are a couple of handguns.
Yet another team that Chris was part of is horribly killed. At some point, you'd think they would stop giving him missions.
You know, I fail to understand your hate boner towards Chris Redfield. Anyway, the team that was killed led by Captain DeChant was Alpha Team, and Chris and Sheva were to rendezvous with them to support them to arrest Irving where the original deal was going to take place before Alpha Team realized it was a setup. Chris isn't at all responsible for this.
For as much as they force you to stare at Sheva's ass, I remain unimpressed.
Hey, it's fine if you're not impressed. Doesn't mean a lot of us weren't, and I know I sure as hell was. More so, I was impressed with all of these too, if you know what I'm saying.
These Ouroboros worm monsters always conveniently attack in an area that contains fire, their only weakness. Here one helpfully walks itself into a furnace. Even it didn't want to be in this game for very long.
Bullshit. The Ouroboros boss does not deliberately by itself walk into the furnace like some sort of suicide attempt. The player is the one who has to lure it in. Everyone who's played this game up to this point knows you're straight up manipulating this clip.
Our transportation has been taken out too.
You are standing right next to working Humvees, and you have a helicopter flying around assisting you.
I don't think that's what Sheva meant, considering the area that she and Chris need to travel through in order to meet up with Delta Team. Doesn't seem like it has enough open space to drive one of those things through. They're also inside of a warehouse with a huge gate that could be locked. As for the helicopter, it only provides air support and would probably need to land in a huge open space to even pick up any more passengers, and that's not something we see on the path that Chris and Sheva need to take. Also, I think it's a good thing they don't travel in the helicopter considering what happens to Kirk.
Oh my god.
This game has recycled all the ideas of Resident Evil 4, but none of the charm and fun.
Yes, that's what happened here. In fact, this game follows a similar 3-part act as in Resident Evil 4, even down to similar locations and basic enemies. But keep in mind that the plot starts with a simple premise of arresting Ricardo Irving and then gradually becomes more than that, which was also the case in Resident Evil 4.
Did that smoke actually knock Chris down? The smoke canister landed at Irving's feet and he was just fine. Yet Chris falls over when the smoke touches him.
More likely that he was taking cover considering Irving was armed and the gas could better hide him if he ducked.
All of these BSAA soldiers died without radioing in that they were under attack by a slow-moving giant, because Chris, Sheva, and the soldier who drove them were completely shocked upon seeing the carnage.
An explanation that can be drawn from this is that possibly the Indesu caught them all by surprise and they were all killed before one could call it in. Before the night transition though, when you're fighting the Maginis on motorcycles, you hear this.
We're under attack! There are too many of them to handle! Reinforcements are en route. Hold your position until they arrive. Repeat, hold your position. Let's pick up the pace!
This implies that they were attacked by multiple enemies. Maybe at first they were attacked by Magini, and in the midst of that fight, the Indesu was unleashed and subsequently killed them all.
There are no more orders from here on in. It's just us.
We are partners. To the end.
You've known each other for half a day. At best, that's a I'll get you a coffee at Starbucks sometimes level of partnership.
I'd argue to believe their level of partnership goes a bit further than a cup of coffee. Sure, they probably don't know each other too well on a personal level just yet, but gameplay aside, they've saved each other's asses from certain death on at least 2 occasions.
Are you okay?
How is it that Wesker can dodge bullets but not Jill's much slower body tackle?
Wesker was too concentrated in killing his most hated enemy, and that's how Jill caught him by surprise. Remember, in his boss fight towards the end, the lights need to be turned off in order to blind him and catch him off guard. It's suggested that even though he's fast enough to dodge bullets, he does not perceive things or process things faster than a normal human. I should note, however, that this point can be debated, because his boss fight mechanics are a little inconsistent throughout the 3 times you fight him before he mutates.
7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
I'll see you dead. Ignorant traitors.
Jill and Wesker survived this.
Yes, Jill's survival is incredible, but it's likely that whatever they landed on, Wesker took the full blunt of the impact since Jill was holding on to him from behind, and that could explain why she wasn't killed on impact. Also, she survived because Wesker wasn't killed and gave her medical attention. But, really? You're surprised Wesker survived?
Jill's body was never found and she was presumed dead.
Why would Jill be presumed dead if her body was never found? She fell off a cliff. It's pretty easy to find a body in that situation. And if both Jill and Wesker's bodies were never recovered, then they should be presumed alive.
Oh boy, there's a lot to unpack here, everyone, so strap in. First, Jill was presumed dead because the BSAA conducted a search for 3 months and found absolutely nothing. Her body, nor any of her personal effects were recovered, and 3 months is a long time. When it comes to military personnel, this is how it goes down. If you're not found after some time has passed, then you are presumed to have been killed in action. Also, another thing that could have factored in the conclusion that she was dead is where they landed. We don't get to see at all, but it's possible there could have been a body of water they landed in after first crashing into the presumed rock faces on the way down. Those conducting the search could have deemed it unlikely that Jill could have survived. Also taking into fact that Wesker basically takes Jill with him, and rumors of her survival only start to surface about 3 years after the events of Lost in Nightmares, and it's not really a major stretch to understand why they concluded that she was dead. Second, I do agree that it was foolish of Chris to think Wesker could have been killed in that fall. However, and this leads to third, as I mentioned before, their bodies were never recovered, and Wesker in a sense went into hiding and did not meet Chris again until 3 years later.
We last met at the Spencer estate, wasn't it?
Still foolish of Chris to think Wesker could have been killed.
Shit, Wesker. I thought he was dead.
But I can see why the BSAA came to this conclusion.
It looks like Irving is trying to blow up the place and make his escape.
Why does he need to blow up an oil refinery before escaping? Can't he just escape? He can't really be worried about evidence in this situation. He expects most of the world's population to be dead in a few weeks and himself among the people controlling everything left.
You're not keeping up, are you? He's blowing up the oil refinery in another failed attempt to kill Chris and Sheva. Who do you think was responsible for these 3?
Splendid timing! You two are just in time for the fireworks show!
Being from New Jersey is my entire character. I honestly can't tell you a single other thing about Irving. I don't even know what he was doing in this game that made him so bad.
Well, I can. Ricardo Irving is a black market dealer, and he was employed by Tricell. It's implied through the game's files that he was the one who initially brought Las Plagas into Africa, though that seems unlikely. And he's done plenty in the game up to this point, considering he unleashed 3 major POWs that led to the deaths of the Alpha and Delta teams.
Sheva, do you read me? I secured a boat. I'm on the other side of the dock. Get here on the double.
I couldn't possibly drive the boat over to you at that other dock. You'll have to run here in under 1 minute before the place explodes while fending off crazed people trying to kill you.
Josh is by himself and he protects the boat due to it needing to be released from the port. You can see Chris doing this in the cutscene when he and Sheva arrive. Although Josh isn't directly attacked by Maginis, they are in the area and can easily overwhelm him since he's only armed with a handgun. It makes sense that he protects the boat while Chris and Sheva make their way to him.
Question: who's steering the boat during all of this?
We don't see it in any cutscenes. However, there is such a thing as autopilot, even for boats.
I don't care what parasite Irving injected himself with, you are not gaining a blue whale's mass in seconds.
You should care, since the plaga that Irving injected himself with is an experimented dominant plaga that causes an uncontrollable and extreme mutation in the host based on their will, but it can also be affected by the environment.
If you say so, you're pretty much stuck living in this swamp for the rest of your life since your body is aquatic.
Yeah. It was either inject himself with that Plaga specimen, be arrested by the BSAA, or be killed. He was threatened by Jill and clearly had no intention of being taken in alive. Irving would be RE5's version of Del Lago had he killed the agents.
So far we fought a giant bat, a giant fish, a giant worm, and now a giant crab. This game really pulled out all the stops for these boss battles.
I mean, even previous Resident Evil games had giant or mutated versions of animals, reptiles, and sea creatures. We've had spiders, dogs, sharks, fleas, bees, snakes, alligators, frogs, monkeys, a scorpion, a centipede, a bat, and the list goes on. What's the big deal about this game experimenting with that same formula or even adding more to it?
Although, weren't you two given orders to retreat?
So it was you!
This is supposed to be some kind of double cross since Excella runs Tricell's Africa division, which I guess is part of the consortium that funds the BSAA, but the game never showed her running anything and Chris didn't even know who she was until Sheva told him. And this just makes me wonder why if she can have the BSAA order Chris and Sheva to withdraw, why didn't she stop them from going on the mission in the first place?
So the fact that Chris doesn't know the CEO of a division, a company that helps fund the organization he works for, is a huge issue? I really don't see why Chris should know this considering his position in the BSAA at the time this game is happening. And seriously, why didn't she stop them from going on the mission in the first place? I won't go into the extreme details and lore, but I'll make it simple. There was more than enough evidence and intelligence gathered by the BSAA West African branch to warrant an investigation.
Wesker. I thought he was dead.
Why? Wesker fell off the same cliff Jill did, and you know she's alive. It's not too much of a stretch to accept that the superhuman who defied death multiple times already managed to do so again.
For Chris thinking that Wesker was dead, okay, I'll give you that one. But in Chris's defense, the reason he likely thought Wesker was dead was mostly because Wesker has not resurfaced at all in the 3 years between the events of what transpires at the Spencer estate and the events in Kijiuju. Since the BSAA could not find either Jill or Wesker's body after the fall, I can see why Chris thought that. I should also point, however, that you said this before.
Jill and Wesker survived this.
So should he have survived it or not? Getting mixed signals here.
I speak for everyone who's ever played this game without a co-op partner when I say, fuck this fucking piece of fucking goddamn bullshit in particular. I almost stopped playing the game at this point.
Shit yeah, especially on professional.
Now, let's finish this once and for all.
He says, before he gets bored and leaves after just a few minutes of fighting.
It's characterization, my friend. That particular trait would be arrogance, which has consistently shown to be part of Wesker's character.
7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you.
This fight in no way lasts 7 minutes.
You sure about that? Let's see.
7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I can spare to play with you. Playtime is over. How fortunate for you.
How about that? Now this of course doesn't count if you choose to fight him, as he does retreat before 7 minutes if you cause enough damage.
Not to be outdone by Sheva's ass shots, Jill gets a slow motion shot of her crotch.
Not to be a pervert, but fan service!
Wesker has a mind control app on his BlackBerry. Do you remember what it was like to run apps on a BlackBerry?
I remember my first BlackBerry, and boy did it suck. Anyway, Albert Wesker is rich due to acquiring so many viral agents over the years and selling them to rival companies. He has many resources at his disposal. With that being said, he has custom equipment and accessories. Knowing this and the custom phone that has a button that likely administers more of the drug controlling Jill isn't a major stretch to believe.
How exactly does this crystal thing on Jill's chest control her mind? You would think that would have to be connected to her head.
Not the way the game is presenting it. The drug that's being administered to Jill, called P30, is a performance-enhancing drug that augments the abilities of the user. Along with that, the user can be controlled. How exactly they are controlled isn't really explained even in the game's files, but it's pretty obvious that the drug just needs to be inside of the user's bloodstream in order for their free will to be usurped. The device on her chest constantly administers P30 to keep Jill under control.
I'm gonna be alright. You do need to stop him.
We can't just leave you here.
You have to.
Yeah, I can't possibly go with you and help. I only kicked both of your asses with ease. What could I possibly do in this battle to save the world?
Not that I would know because I've never done any drugs my entire life, but I'm thinking that the effects of being suddenly cut off from P30 and the fact that she had to get her ass kicked so Chris and Sheva could remove the device may have left Jill in a groggy state. We don't have too much to go by, except for this clip from Desperate Escape.
You are awake. Wait a minute. You are Jill Valentine.
The way she's holding her head implies a headache or dizziness. Reasons like this and believing she would only slow Chris and Sheva down are likely the reasons she talked Chris into going ahead without her. Also, the effects of P30 are temporary, so if you're implying that she still has those enhanced attributes she displayed during the boss fight, sorry, but no cigar.
You're our only hope to survive this.
Then why don't you help them?
Refer to my previous sin.
So, you've made it this far. Too bad you won't make it much further.
They've only made it past hundreds of my men, several monsters we've sent to stop them, a brainwashed Jill Valentine, and a fight with me. And every time I assumed their death was a certainty, but my confidence is not shaken at all.
Again, that's called characterization, and that's consistent with his character. Characterization is not a goddamn sin.
Albert! You said we change this world together! Oh, why?
I never thought Wesker would betray me, says woman who knows Wesker has betrayed everyone he's ever worked with.
And yet, another character brimming with overconfidence and arrogance. Characterization is not a goddamn sin.
This would be a much more effective scene had Jill actually died back then. Instead, Chris just flashes back to that time his partner almost died, and this just kind of reminds him of that, meaning this moment has no real emotional weight.
Capcom wouldn't kill off Jill just like that, since she's one of the series' most popular and beloved characters. I do agree that it would have had more emotional weight, but I'd argue that it has just enough to make Chris want to take a drastic action to save his new partner. This strong sense of duty and protection especially carried over into RE6, where Chris was the captain and he wanted to protect his team.
This game was so awful that I'm honestly even more impressed that Resident Evil 7 was good enough to bring the series back from the brink.
As far as I've seen going by the reception of this game, it was really RE6 that had a more polarizing reception and really made Capcom put the brakes on the series. Sure, RE5 started to accelerate the game's new way over-the-top action, which eventually led to RE6, but RE5 was much better well received critically and commercially over Part 6.
Ensuring complete global saturation.
Hey everyone, OmegaBlackHeart here. Thanks for watching my first Everything Wrong with video. You want to see me do more videos like this? Subscribe to me. Help my channel out since it helps a lot. Won't cost you a dime, I promise. Catch you all later.